Adam, you really are too kind with the brilliant, but I'll see what I can do. So I'm very, very excited to introduce you all to our esteemed panelists here to start a conversation on the topic Adam mentioned, which is one very near and dear to my heart. I think it follows on well from the sessions we've seen this morning because everything we've talked about, of course, requires leadership to be successful, the transition, the collaboration, and ultimately leading the digital workforce. So um, without any further ado, let me introduce you to the first member of our panel. This is Elisabetta Purlalli with E&I. She's the Senior Vice President, Head of LNG Equity. Elisabetta, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please, and specifically why you're passionate to be here today talking about leadership in an agile world?
Yes, for sure. So good afternoon. Nice to be here today. As you said, I'm working for ENI. I've been in the business for over 20 years, always on gas, supply gas, and then LNG. And I discovered so much about the importance of different cultures and different attitudes. And I've experienced by being called to lead the digital, let's say, setup of a digital competence center, how important is that people are onboarded and understand the importance of digitalization. So I'm pleased to be here because coming from business, I understand very well that we need to make a lot of steps forward to have digital inside our mind.
Love it. Welcome to the panel, Elisabetta. Next up, Vitor de Valle with Petrobras, the head of the Center of Excellence for User Experience and Digital Technology. Tell us about yourself, Vitor.
Hello, guys. Thank you for having me. I'm good morning from Brazil because I'm in Rio. It's quite 10 and 50 right now. So my background is almost in 20 years in data. My background is data, and after some a lot of experience in BW and Spotify and other self BI platforms, I was addressed to be to an innovation center, then to a center of experience, user experience, and digital technologies. So right now I'm leading a user experience and digital technologies department, which is addressing some agile important themes like immersive technologies and user experience in a more mature way at Petrobras. So I'm glad to be here to know more about how you all are addressing the agile themes in digitalization, and not only in technology, but most in the culture and people as well.
Great point, Vitor. I can't wait to dive into the technology versus the culture, or technology and the culture, as I like to look at it topic. Next up, Tracy Beam is the CEO and Principal Digital Strategy and Business Advisor with Strategic Transformation Partners. Try and say that one quickly. Tracy, tell us about yourself and why you're excited to be on this panel.
Well, I'm really passionate about changing all of anything that has to do with the future of energy, and particularly in disrupting the status quo, really mobilizing those people to empower them to be more successful on their journey and to make really noble and profound changes to the world and, give back. Those things that are really going to make an impact that will give love for everyone.
Perfect. Welcome to the panel.
I mostly consult Fortune 100 companies. I work with their leadership teams and their CEOs and boards to develop strategic direction to be able to thrive during times of change.
Awesome. We'll dive into the thriving and change through the panel here. Next up, Esther Diederen with Spirit Energy, the Digital Transformation Lead. Go ahead, introduce yourself, please, Esther.
Hi, so I'm Esther. I'm part of the Going Digital Spirit Energy. As there, I'm looking after all of the change management, people and processes. I think I'm very passionate about it because I think within Spirit we are now 3 years within our digital journey. And as I think you probably have heard it a lot during today, but change is really important. Factor in actually establishing a digital culture, but also establishing an agile culture. And I think what I've seen more and more that even when you work agile or you claim to work agile, you work Scrum, what we really need and what we really have to focus on is creating an agile mindset and an agile mentality as well. And that's where different leadership skills come in, but also different delivery processes. And it's not an easy catch. It's not easily done. So just by saying, oh, we work agile or we have Scrum, that doesn't mean that as a company you are agile or that you are actually having the digitalization going ahead. And I'm very curious to learn from the guys, the rest of the team on the panel.
Well said, Esther. We're choosing to do these things not because they're easy, but perhaps because they're hard, and it's more than just the tools, right, and the processes. I love the mindset perspective.
It
Last
is,
but
yes.
by no means least, we have Pedro Alcantara with Kongsberg, Senior Vice President for Digital World. Pedro, why are you excited to be on this panel? And tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
Yes. Hi, Ben. I think it's fair to say that I spent most of my career running internationalization programs and market entry programs. And when you work establishing international operations, one of the key things that you're trying to achieve is to make sure that a remote group is self-sufficient and resilient, while being geographically disconnected from headquarters. So I've seen technology helping a lot decision support and decision making on the ground, and also digital solutions that could really bridge this communication between headquarters and people on site. So I'm really passionate about how digital solutions can link people that are not able to work daily with all the infrastructure and resources that a headquarters usually have.
It is unfortunate that there's sometimes a disconnect there, and so appreciate the work you're doing across Kongsberg and the industry to help close that gap. So welcome to all of our panelists. Just a little bit about myself. 15 years with Chevron, mostly in the wells function, and like Pedro was alluding to, saw the tension between office and field personnel, and saw the frustration of people trying to hunt down information and try and find the data that they needed. And so found myself in this digital transformation world. Currently the product line manager for assurance in our wells function. And my personal mission is to engineer happiness. So as a leader, I'm acutely aware of the role I play to make that a reality. And that's why I'm passionate to have this group of individuals and have a conversation about the true value of leadership in an agile world. So let's kick things off here, starting with culture, as Adam introduced, is going to be a common theme throughout this discussion. And I'll ask each of our panelists just to weigh in on how do you, as leaders, create a culture that truly does embrace digital transformation? And why don't we start with you, Tracy?
That's a great question. I think that from a leadership perspective, a whole lot's changed over the last 2 years, especially when it comes to digital innovation and transformation. Because of some of the complexities with COVID, with some of the external pressures that are being applied, increasing regulatory compliance challenges. There's just been so much going on that culture seems to be sometimes forgotten. And what I'm seeing as a trend in the more successful companies is that they're leaning into that challenge, and they're taking those challenges and turning them into opportunities. They're having to be more intentional about how they are leading, not just from within, right? One of the things that leaders, especially CEOs or frontline leaders, were really focused on before was down and in within their companies, and they're having to reposition themselves as to be up and out. And what I mean by that is they're really focusing on the entire ecosystem of leadership, what their role is in the ecosystem, how they are leading through this transition that we're going through in energy. And what that means, the impact to their frontline leaders, is that those folks who are really usually focused on the middle management are more focused now on the down, like really stepping up into the role of the down and in, that the CEOs, the CIOs, the top line leaders in the past really fulfilled. And I'm also seeing an increasing participation from board and very diversified boards coming together, which is really great and fantastic to see, because that diversity is really helping companies accelerate through this change. So those are the top things that I keep seeing.
Thanks, Tracy. I really like the down from down and in to up and out, and that focusing on the overall ecosystem, because we'll touch on change here in a few minutes. But I'd like to hear maybe from Esther. You talk specifically about Agile and Agile being a mindset. So how do you as a leader encourage that ecosystem, as Tracy was alluding to, or taking Agile beyond just the tools and the processes?
I think what we are in the process of getting better at that. I think we have to bear in mind, Spirit is an oil and gas operator, so we can't do everything as per Agile or Scrum, because sometimes you do have to have a solid waterfall process with a lot of checks in there, as you all know. But where I think Spirit is growing into is that we are starting to work much more cross-functional. We are much more getting just deliver. As a leader, they're not telling you anymore how to deliver, but we need to increase on X. Just go and do it, and have more mandate, getting people rounded up together and getting somewhere, instead of you do this, you are IS, you only look at this a little bit, you do HR and you do this. We are getting more and more teams to get working together, and I think that's a big change from where we were to where we are getting to, and that's a change in leadership skill. It's a change in more the control way to actually, well, I want to be able to do X. And you as a company, we have a lot of experts in there, go together. And as Tracy mentioned, we do within digital have a lot of experts with us, because we are an oil and gas company. We are not necessarily the ones who do the coding and the automation. That's where we have our partners. They are good at that. We work together. This is what we want to achieve. And it's a process. I don't say we're there, but I feel that we are getting more and more into that agile mindset, where we're getting a bit more traction and a bit more speed in delivery as well.
It sounds pretty exciting to me, Esther. I think anything that can help break down silos, whether those are functional silos or technical silos or just legacy silos that have been established for whatever reason, and move towards what I really like you saying is be more outcome focused. So less about here's the specific inputs that I want you to do, and more about here's the outcome I need you to achieve. How do you assemble the right team? How do you maybe self-organize the folks that have passion about this and interest about this to deliver the results?
Yes.
So, and picking up on the reliance on the business partner ecosystem, why don't we move over to Pedro to hear a little perspective from the business partner side?
Yes. No, but it's a lot about what Esther was saying, right? I think what we are trying to do as a digital partner is trying to understand what are the requirements that our clients, the operators, are and what are they trying to achieve through the digital transformation process, and trying to translate their requirements into solutions. But of course, we tried a lot to share experience from what we learn in one operation to what we hear in another operation. I remember that I've been in meetings where operators were saying, okay, let's move decision making from offshore to onshore. And then I was in another meeting the same day, and I heard an operator say, we need to move decision making from onshore to offshore. And then I say, okay, we need to start learning from these different examples and trying to put the industry together and understanding why there are so many changes that are required before the digital transformation takes place. I think one key aspect that not everything needs to be digitized. Not everything requires like a 3D visualization, a 3D tool. I think what the industry is maturing now is to understand that it's more about workflows. It's more about understanding how workflows can be interconnected. How can you create intelligent workflows that will support decision making, that will automate decision, instead of just replacing the decision maker with a tool that by magic will do everything alone. So I think we are more mature now, both industry and digital partners, trying to find solutions that it's more grounded to operational reality.
I love it, Pedro, and sounds like you see yourself as somewhat of a translator there, taking the requirements and maybe the needs and perhaps even the latent needs that clients and operators maybe can't perfectly articulate, and helping them find solutions. And your point is not lost about you can't please everyone. There's a fable about a man, a boy, and a donkey that you can go and Google after this meeting if anyone's interested, that you can't please everyone. And so we do need to prioritize and be value focused. So some great points. Elisabetta, anything you'd like to add to this topic of creating the culture to embrace digital transformation as a leader?
Yes, I think that basically all of us has to be a leader in its own workplace. And I think that all of us can contribute to change, leveraging on changing the approach. Approach using technology as much as possible, even though we are not, let's say, informatic experts. Leaders today, I think, are very much in the same boat as their colleagues, because I think that we are still in a phase where the learning curve is very steep for both of us. So this is certainly, I think, not an easy task, but is a to-do task, because I think that in the oil and gas companies, let's say per nature, they are traditional and they are happy to stick to the usual way of working. Therefore, it's extremely difficult to make them change. But now we don't have any choice. I mean, having a choice was an objective a few years ago, as Tracy was mentioning, but it's now it's time. We need to move because the wave is already there, and more than that, it's the energy transition wave which has arrived, and it's already overwhelming everything. So economically, technically, politically, socially. So digitalization is the only thing that, if it enters into our mind, in the mind of our colleagues, will really help reaching the goals that all our companies have as a target. So 2050 as, let's say, zero carbon objective without digital is pretty difficult. So I think that we definitely need to digitalize, to decarbonize, and digitalizing implies, by definition, changing. So I think that it's unavoidable that we have to change the mindset, as Esther was mentioning, and understand that data are one essential element of this change. So the data are the key company assets, and we need to focus on data to change the processes, to arrive to a quicker time to market, saving money and time. So I think that data can really have a transformative power, so helping understanding how digital can do for our industry, and it's helping to change the status quo. So I think that finally the final ingredient is also the fact of having an agile mentality. That means that leadership should be more adaptive, with a think out of the box approach, very open, able to accept disruption and stimulate disruptive ideas, which is not yet there. I mean, the maturity is not yet there. The active listening attitude, and the fact of being a little bit more brave and experimental. Because as it was mentioned by Esther as well, I mean, we need to understand that being agile means being rapid and let's say quicker to decide, and especially to deploy. So I would say that the digitalization, I'm really convinced that the leaders should understand, and also all of us together should understand that digitalization is a kind of multiplier of our human capacity, and that will allow us to create the more and the better solutions that we need today. So that's digital and agility must go hand in hand, and we will overcome also what you said, Ben, which I like very much, the fact that it's not a matter of hiding infos. Today is a matter of sharing data and infos.
Yeah, well said, Elisabetta, and I think you're the second panelist now to say that change is difficult and we're choosing to do this intentionally. And I like that you said it's not just an option now, or it's not just maybe a strategy, but it becomes existential to change. And to paraphrase Darwin, I believe he said it's not the smartest or the strongest that survives, but the one most adaptable to change. He was talking about species, but I think you can pretty well apply that to companies as well. So picking up on your thread about being data driven and the data being an essential element and helping multiply our human capacity, I'll invite Vitor to add any final comments on this topic. And I know you have a strong background in the data space. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, Ben, in Agile World, I believe the one key aspect for the Agile teams is the autonomy for the teams. So when you talk to autonomy, the teams, you need the instruments for the team to improve themselves by their own. And in this way, I guess I believe that the right way to have the proper instruments for their improvement is share data to them, share their own data for all their projects. So they need to keep tracking their all success in all their projects and keep tracking and keep improving. So self-service analytics, self-service data is a fundamental tool for them to improve. So these and we need, as a company, as a leaders, we need to provide the environment to share the data, the appropriate data. We have lots of problems in terms of structured data for the teams, and we need to focus on this structure, like GDPR, like integration, connectivity, and the strategy. Cybersecurity right now, it's a hot topic, because when you integrate IoT and your autonomous your connection and network, it's risky that you can shut down your wells, your platforms, or any engine in your company. So you need to provide the structure and think about the structure. Cloud, think about the cloud advent for the team and what you can bring from them and introduce to your company. So there are lots of challenges in how to expose the platforms and tools and instruments for shared data to the autonomy of it. And the teams must be empowered with this data to keep improving themselves.
Such a powerful message, Vitor, for I think all of us as leaders to provide that autonomy and to empower our workforce, like you said, to thrive and to do what they do best. And a big component of that is sharing the data, right? Leaders change outcomes. So if we can dig a little deeper into this topic about accessing data, at least in my mind, we're on a journey of transforming our workforce from what I call data hunter-gatherers. They're surveying these vast plains, scavenging the data they can find, foraging around, and we're trying to move to this empowered, like you said, self-service analytics mode where the data is available to them at their fingertips. So maybe I'll go over to Pedro. Any thoughts on how, or any thoughts you can share on how Kongsberg is is applying this, and a bit to what Vitor was saying, the empowerment, the setting people up for success to have the data they need to make decisions?
I think when you have remote teams, what you're trying to do is to make sure that they have access to the best quality of data, possible data, so they can be resilient without headquarters. So I think what Kongsberg is trying to do with its technology is to transform our softwares in a place where it's easy to access contextualized information. So that's what we are trying to do, because it's there's a lot of work taking place in data aggregation. There's a lot of work taking place sorting the data, organizing the data, visualizing the data. But there's a key aspect, which is to contextualize the correct data, and to make sure that you have applications which is really supporting the decision making on site. And I think it's also very important that this contextualized data, it's visual both on site and back in the remote monitoring rooms onshore. So both teams can have the same operational visibility when they are taking decisions, and then they can take collective decisions. And I think usually what we see is that you have people on the rig trying to explain to people on shore what they see, and you have people on shore trying to explain people on the rig what they see on the remote rooms. But they cannot access the same thing simultaneously. And I think this is a challenge that we in the industry, we need to fix. We need to make sure that the real-time operation centers have the same level of visibility that the guys have on the rig, because then they can have a constructive discussion about what's taking place. And then instead of judging decision making, judging if each side is taking the correct decision, they can support each other and take a collective decision. And I think this will only take place when both sides trust the data. That's why it's not only about aggregating the data and visualizing the data, it's about also choosing what are the correct use cases that should define the contextualization, so it will support the correct type of information and the correct decision support that team requires. So I see this a lot. I think both our digital twins, our real-time operation softwares, they are moving in this direction. Easy access to contextualized data, both onshore and offshore.
I think it's such a powerful word, that contextualize, because I've seen it too, much like you, Pedro, and I'm sure our other panelists as well. It's a little bit like that team building exercise where you put two people in a room and get one team to explain like a shape, and you sort of sit back and laugh at what's happening. But that's how we've run our business for the best part of the last century. So I really taking away that contextualize, and of course, it's nothing without the trust, because if you have two people arguing with each other, then about what they're seeing or what's happening, then you're not solving problems and moving forward. You're just looking backwards. So I'll invite any other panelists to weigh in on this data specific component of leadership.
Yeah. Elisabetta, you go. Sorry.
No, but it's the same. Please go ahead. No problem.
I think what we see within Spirit is indeed you need to trust the data. That's really important. So I think with the reference to the self, what we are looking into is get freedom to create their own reports, but have a specific branding for the ones that are actually classified and that we know the data sources from, that they come direct from source, etc. But I think one other thing is that even when we have the data and we have the trust in the data, there's also two things indeed. You have to give the people the confidence to make that decision, because they're not used to be able to make it. So again, that agile mindset come back in, but also to have the processes, because if you still have, or no, I call it all, but a process that you have to go several loops to make the decision. You might have the data there, etc., but you might still have to wait for the next whatever decision board, which is in 2 weeks' time, so we can't make a decision. So again, it's that combination of having the right data, but also having the processes supporting that you can make a quick decision and have your teams mandated, trusted to make these, because they are not used to. We are looking at upwards to make decisions, and suddenly you have the tools to make a decision. It's a change, and it's a big mental change as well. Sorry, I wanted to re-stress that point, because it's a big thing that we've seen.
No, great,
Yes, I would
great
like to.
contribution, Esther.
Yeah, pardon, man. No, I would like to reinforce further all what has been said by saying that indeed what we also saw internally is the shortening of the value chain. I mean, of the decision process along the value chain. So, thanks to the data sharing and the unique access to the same data, what we saw was the fact of changing the attitude of a sequential use of data compared to a parallelization of the use of data. So that if, for example, the exploration guy was using the data, elaborating the data, and then once it has elaborated, it passes through to the reservoir manager, it takes quite a long because he has also to start from scratch. While if you parallelize the fact of using the data according to the, let's say, the work that you have to do according to your competence, you shorten the full process, and of course this means saving money. So it's you work better because you cooperate with the others. You don't have risk of having wrong data because it's unique data, but certainly you benefit in terms of joining earlier the market. So it's extremely powerful, I think. So I just wanted to reinforce this concept of sharing and sharing from the very beginning.
No, thank you both, Elisabetta and Esther, and some similar themes I think around. You said this great power, and of course, with great power comes great responsibility. So it could be a little uncomfortable, perhaps, for leaders as these value chains are being shortened, or as people are empowered to try and make decisions. Because let's remember, every organization is perfectly set up to deliver the results that it does. And when we're talking about trying to change, as you said, Esther, some of those processes to try and get to quicker and better quality decision making, that can be a little uncomfortable. So, any thoughts? Maybe we'll start with you, Pedro, on how leaders can overcome that discomfort or embrace that change that we've all alluded to being not necessarily straightforward.
I think it's important first that we start thinking in one ecosystem where everyone is operating within one ecosystem. I think this is very difficult still for companies. Operators are still very large, and you have multiple digital processes taking place simultaneously within the different departments, within the different divisions, and not necessarily these different digital systems are talking to each other. So you have a digitalization. You have, for example, in the wells, in the drilling and wells team, for instance, a digital system that is operating very well. It's providing data to support decision making and create trust to whoever is taking the decision, but it's operating in silo with another digital system within the same company. And then, of course, it's very difficult to build trust and empower decisions when only one group is having access to that part of the information, and when one information is not building up to the other side of the room. So I think if we focus on putting together one ecosystem where multiple divisions will collaborate and contribute to how the different blocks will be put together to then end up in a decision, then it will become a collective decision. But of course, if we allow for this to continue to be disconnected, then one side will always mistrust the decisions that are taking place from the other side, and it comes with the accountability as well, because there's someone at the end that is responsible for that decision, either supported by a technology or not. And the accountable one wants to make sure that the decision used the correct background information before the decision was taken. So yeah, just food for thoughts on how to put together ecosystems going forward. I think us as digital partners as well, we need to take a larger contribution in helping sort it out, how to unify this ecosystem. It's not an easy task, but we need to support this as well.
Thanks, Pedro. Some very tasty food for thought there indeed, because if there's asymmetry between the information, then we're back to the lack of trust, right? The lack of transparency, and as Esther was alluding to earlier, the silos that are just, we're not going to be able to thrive. Vitor or other panelists, any thoughts on this leader's vulnerability to maybe maybe be able to embrace the faster change, the differences that we're seeing coming at us?
What I could say.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
What I could say very quickly is that indeed we also experience the fact that there is a reluctancy in sharing because all the aspect that Pedro highlighted. I mean, mainly accountability, responsibility. I mean, it's the fear of working horizontally instead of vertically is very much felt. So I think this is a main, let's say, obstacle because of the organizational system and the responsibility system that we have in our companies. But I think that it's unavoidable that we will reach an horizontal, let's say, approach. Otherwise, the old castle floats down. So, Vitor, sorry.
Thanks, Elisabetta. I know, Vitor, you were going to add something.
Yeah, I would say that in terms of data and challenges that we face, in terms of oil and gas companies, we are almost in wealthy company. Is resources not a big issue for select projects. So define what are the main important MVPs for our projects and define how we can measure them and provide the culture for the team to persecute these MVPs, what brings value to the projects is quite a difficult change because we are used to measure the success of projects in terms of waterfall and measure in terms of what brings value to our business. It's not very common in the oil and gas industry. So this is what a challenge I've been experiencing in terms of Petrobras and oil and gas industries.
Yeah, thank you, Vitor. So as leaders, we have the opportunity to set those priorities, to be outcome focused, and to help ensure that the MVPs we're working on are driving value, and people therefore will follow in the direction that we want. So I want to pick up a theme that's been coming out throughout these questions around change. And I've heard it said before that the world's never moved this fast previously, and it's never going to move this slowly again. So we've touched on change being hard and change being challenging, and I would contend that exponential change is actually even difficult for our brains to comprehend. So let's maybe start out with Tracy on how do you successfully manage change in your organization and in the teams and companies that you coach and partner with?
Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. I think it's something we're all struggling with today. Just the velocity of change. Again, it's challenges, but it's also opportunities. And one of the things that I've seen, which has really helped to drive, is particularly because of the pandemic, which created some opportunities to really accelerate adoption and to people just onboarded very quickly because they had to respond to new technology. We saw huge booms in seamless, really pulling together those seamless, integrated, and optimized workflows that you guys were all mentioning. A big focus on worker protection and digital voice communications. Much more investment in the infrastructure from a cloud and networking foundation. All of these things pulled together along with the opportunities to really bring us together as collaborative leaders, but also as the connected worker of the future, right? That's where I've seen the most acceleration and where people are really leaning into the change and helping to drive that, whether it's like workers in the field using tablets, phones, AR, VR, leveraging all of the data, robotics, drones, increased efficiencies in our gateways and nodes. From a networking perspective, remote operation centers are very much so, I think, increasingly and almost daily improving in the way that they're sharing and visualizing data, so that they can make those real-time decisions. I've noticed that the camera technology has really accelerated. The focus or the shift, the mindset shift has been to applied innovation. And what I really mean about that is touching on what you had said, Victor, is that the purpose of a business is really to create value, right? There's some product or service or value that you're providing. And I really love the fact that you were highlighting that we're starting to lead from within and starting to look at it from the value that we're creating externally versus the value we're creating internally as teams. And I think a lot of that has to do with the flattening or the horizontal leadership that's happening today, where everyone's success relies on each other's success. There's no more of this siloed appreciation. And I love that leaders are starting to really also highlight failures as much as success, as a learning opportunity. We went down this path and it didn't work, but here's what we learned and here's how we're going to apply it back. And I think that goes to your point of taking away that fear of really having, enabling leaders to step into their roles without the fear of failure, right? Where they're embracing failure as an opportunity. Did I answer your question?
I mean, it's a great response, Tracy, and I love that you're turning the challenges into opportunities, and especially in regard to the pandemic, it can be easy to get very negative looking at what's happening around the world, but stepping back, reflecting that people have responded and people have adopted things arguably much faster than perhaps they would have. They say necessity is the mother of innovation, so the failure versus the success. It represents that concept of a learning leader who's willing to understand they don't know everything and mature their own journey versus a know-it-all leader who inevitably no one can know everything with all of this change. So I'll invite Esther. Would you like to build on what Tracy said about managing this ever increasing, exponentially increasing change?
Yeah, I like that you said the word successfully managing change. That is hard, and I would lie if I say it's all successful, because even in change we are making mistakes. But I think what has been proven successful for us is that we learn to more and more lean actually on a little bit on what Elisabetta said, that everybody is a leader in this one. So it's not, yes, we have our XCOM on board and they want to have the change and they are giving more freedom to create these networks internally, but we are also seeing that and putting more responsibility to our just the employers. Everybody is a leader in this. So what I like to see, and I got it from somewhere on the internet, but when you have a party and there's one person dancing, and that's sometimes me, but the more people start dancing, so you have a few, but in the end nobody can actually stay on the side because you want to be part of it. And I think that's what, at least also because it's not more a choice, it's a necessity now. We have to change, but more and more people starting to really dance and starting to work with the Power BI and think differently. It's like, but how actually can I improve this, even the small workflow? And that's being a leader in your own area. And I think we are getting more and more of these little dancers and creating packs where people are willing to change. And I think then you are truly changing. But it's hard. I mean, I quite like it, but it's hard because it's a big thing. But the more and more people are seeing the change and seeing the dance, they are willing to move. And that's what we see within Spirit, and people are trying to test and indeed the failure. We have launched a few products which in essence they probably didn't do the value that we thought it would be, but we learned from it and we moved on. And I think that's key in this as well.
Yeah, that quest for progress over perfection. And I really love the dance analogy. I know that there was probably a time when it was one or two people dancing, and the dance hall is pretty full now. Sometimes it feels a bit more like maybe a wrestling match than a dance, but I think that's the challenge you're getting at, is that we will get knocked down and there will be challenges along the way, but if we can get up, dust ourselves off, and keep dancing, then we should be able to make it. So let's unpack this even deeper. Maybe I'll go over to Elisabetta and ask the follow-up question: that is simply managing change sufficient, or do we need to be more proactive in championing change in our workforces?
No, I think that we need both of them. The fact that we need to celebrate when a change is done, but we always have to be proactive every day with respect to the change. And I think that due to the fact that creating a culture, a changing culture that is always ready to any kind of change that the current environment is requiring, requires too many efforts, so everybody is in the game. So everybody has to dance using the nice metaphor of Esther. So I think that in order to grasp the benefit of the digitalization and from innovation, we need to give evidence every day of the results that we can obtain with digitalization. Digital is something that, by definition, I mean, if you think about the term digital, you think about something which is abstract. On the contrary, we need to make that very tangible. When people are afraid, where people are reluctant, and if you show that with digitalization you may work in an easier way, better, with shorter time, with greater performance, that means for you maybe a bonus at the end of the process, of course they will be willing to change. And then is really like no one will remain out of the dancing place, because of course they understand that it's better to change. And I think that it's a matter of working continuously, working in a kind of contamination scheme where you understand that, for example, a digital native that you introduce into the team and you make the team transversal, you make the team cross-functional, you realize that he is not better than me, but together we can do better. So I think that championing is key, but you need so you need to celebrate when the change is done, but you have to continuously work on the change. And as Tracy said at the beginning, all these is really part of change in management. I mean, if you don't have a strong change management program with people that are making, let's say, fitting for purpose every time for the single, let's say, department, but having the overall vision, then you don't manage. So the winning weapon, I think, is a strong, committed change management. So not on paper, but something that is really passionate about making the change, being effective, being tangible, and being, let's say, humble as well. Because you don't have to, let's say, give only action, but you need to perceive the ideas that comes from also from the afraid person. So that's my thought.
No, it's a great point.
Explaining what, why, and how every time, and changing every time.
Yeah. And I would even build on that, and I love that, Elisabetta. You're exactly right. It's really focusing on all four of your stakeholders too: your workers, your customers, your shareholders, and society in general. Those are our major four stakeholders So as we're communicating those successes, we have to break it down for what's in it for each of them. And then also at the individual impact level, right? That's where you get true transformation. It's when individuals transform.
Great points both, and the translator theme coming up again that Pedro touched on in a different context, but being able to translate digital being less abstract, making it real for people, show how it can help engineer happiness and make employees far more inspired to contribute to the company's outcomes. And I think you really hit on this and versus this or world, Elisabetta, that I really love, because you always get more with and than you get with or, and digital helps enable that. And you touched on it, that we need to manage the change that's coming at people, and we need to help champion more change. And that is a challenging balancing act for leaders to overcome. Let's dig a little deeper into that. Maybe we can talk about how do leaders find the right balance between, you touched on it, Tracy, the different stakeholders. And so in relation to this conference, we're talking about technologies, and then we're talking about people and culture, and how would we balance or find the right compromise between investing in both of those? And maybe Tracy, do you want to start us off, since you were talking about the stakeholders and the different balancing there?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing to think that you have to remind people to celebrate their successes, but we get so busy, particularly if you're an organization that's shifted to an agile way of working, and you're still kind of cementing your leadership agility, right? Because that takes time, that takes years. And in our industry, most of those folks haven't started on that journey. Maybe 4 years being, I think, the first that really started on an agile shift, like really embracing the cloud, moving everything over, but losing the thread a bit here, but are going on a rant maybe. It's about being intentional about how we're approaching doing that. I think that communication is the key, and you need to have very strong change champions, like Elisabetta said. You need to make sure you're looking at the skill sets in a different way. For these leaders, they need to be excellent communicators. They can't just be technologists that are being lifted. They have to have both those skills, or be great translators, right? Because I laugh all the time because people think I'm this huge technologist, but I'm really I speak both languages, right? Technology and business. And so it's really finding those people, or upskilling or reskilling those employees who need them, those skills to be more effective leaders, and, carrying them along the way, helping them look for opportunities to communicate, pairing them with strong communicators or a communications team or a change management team that's really going to support them in being effective. This is the one area that traditionally gets cut when a budget happens. Change management usually is the first to go, and it's the least rewarded, most people can invest in, right? So I've probably drone on about this forever, but I'll give someone else an opportunity.
No, it's a great point, Tracy, with the intentionality. And I remember when I first met the first change manager I met 8 or 9 years ago, and I asked them, I said, what does this mean? And you're right, it's a critical and often sadly under-rewarded profession for the changes that we're trying to drive. So Pedro, maybe unpacking this a little further, is there a way to design a roadmap to try and integrate or combine people and tech? Back to that and view, the and world versus the or world. Any experience you can share in that space?
Yeah, I think in the last 10 years, when we were all discussing digitalization, it was not very clear to people to understand, okay, how will this impact my life? Are we creating a digitalization process that will end up replacing my role, or we're creating a digitalization process that will support me in my role? And I think that was not clear. And of course, if you are not clear what will happen to you after that journey, you won't participate on that journey. And I think for companies, was also very important for digital companies to create technologies that very clearly will communicate to people that was a supporting tool, was not a replacing tool. And to bring people to the table to define the use cases based on the pains that they see on the daily operations. And then they will clearly understand, okay, what we are trying to achieve here is an application that once it's deployed, I will be able to use and take better decisions and then contribute even further to my company. And I think this was a role that was a little bit miscommunicated before. We were talking about artificial intelligence, we were talking about machine learning, we were talking about autonomous operations, automated decision making, and all these words started to create an impression to operational people that my days are counted. And I think now the industry changed, and we are talking about situation awareness. We are talking about supporting decision making, about collective decision making, about workflows. So the narrative has changed, and I think technology is changing as well to accommodate for an industry that will never replace people with technology, but that will coexist with good people and good technology. And I think that's what we as digital partners and the operators need really to strive together. That we keep pushing our roadmaps to have better employees placed in better positions so they can take better decisions and achieve better performance, instead of just taking the easy fix that a magic technology will suddenly replace everyone. So I think roadmaps are more balanced now, and people driving this application, this digitalization journey in the operator sides, they are more transparent now as well, not only with us suppliers, but with their employees on what are they really trying to achieve, what's the outcome of that process. I don't know if I answered your question.
Oh, you did very well. The collective workforce is a powerful message, and I think you're right that we as leaders haven't done a great job historically of articulating the facts, like you said, the complementary nature of technology and people, and in the absence of facts, people tend to create their own. So there is a bit of damage control and possibly clawing back from a previous lack of messaging. And it's back to the comment that Tracy and others have alluded to, that the change management, the intentionality of explaining this is why we want to do this, the design thinking approach of understanding people's needs or their latent needs perhaps to help them make their job more enjoyable, will go a long way in overcoming how much to invest in people and how much to invest in the technologies. And so maybe let's oh, please go ahead, Esther, weigh in.
Sorry,
yes.
Ben. Just also to come back to what Pedro and Tracy said about the being translator. It's really important that we speak one language, because a lot of the miscommunication is come because you either speak a technology language or an operational language or even a change management language, and now we infuse agile language and Scrum, and people are starting about products and sprints, and everybody like, what are we talking about? That's when you say intentional change management, having one language which clearly communicates what the outcome, that's so important. And I think we are getting there, but there are a lot of languages going on, and we're trying to do so much with digital, with Scrum and Agile and everything there, and then energy transition has popped up in a whole new vocabulary as well. And we as change managers or as leaders, you really have to make sure that what you say is really what you're meant to say, because it's easy to use a term, and I do that a little bit the same. So I'm talking between the business and between development partners, and sometimes I use terms that I don't actually understand, but I create more chaos by doing that than by actually trying to, okay, what am I saying, what is the outcome I need? And that's really important for change, to get that translation and have one language at least when you communicate. It's yeah, you go off in a tangent if you get it wrong, I think.
I really like the idea of a common language, and more importantly, perhaps, is that vulnerability and that humility of, hey, what do you mean by a sprint, or what do we mean by a Scrum team, and both sides being willing to open up and admit what they don't know, and leaders and followers alike to be able to get to as close as we can get to that common language that you alluded to, Esther. All right, so we've got about 10 minutes. I'm not seeing live questions coming in, so maybe one final prepared remark around, we've been talking about this reskilling and the fact that the future is going to look different to what it looks like today. And maybe we'll start with you, Vitor, around how can leaders effectively and efficiently reskill their workforce so that they are able to, really unleash the power of their leadership in this agile world?
Yeah, I believe that leaders can be very attention people, pay attention on people. As a user experience leader here at Petrobras, I've been. It's not my background. I'm not an specialist in user experience, but I found how impressive is this word, because in Agile we taste the communication, as Tracy said, the communication among the team and the product channel is very powerful for our products, but it's not enough. We need to get a step over it. Is how is the impact for all the users? If I ask for any of you, uh, how many people do you have in manufacture, in maintenance or operation or inspection? You probably will check in a few minutes and give me a number. But if I ask you how many daltonic people you have, how many people don't have social media, and these aspects shape some products we develop every day in our company. So we need to understand the word of the people and build the technology to them, and not bring them to the technology.
Yeah, listen to understand, like you said, the larger stakeholders, and then understanding what skill gaps they have so that we can offer to upskill and support those. Some great points, Vitor. Tracy, I know this is a topic that's pretty near and dear to you, so maybe you could share some examples of approaches you've used for successful upskilling.
Yeah, I think it's again another great question. The key is to make sure that it's accessible and that you've built in time to people's daily lives to be able to actually take advantage of whatever training or learning journey that you're on. But I think I'm also seeing a much greater shift towards real time or just in time learning. Where we're actually creating connected worker tools that are changing behavior as they are impacted. For example, if you are looking at products like FieldSafe or others that would actually track and manage the journeyman experience and send notifications, make sure that, after they hit a certain amount of hours where they're working, you could really see a significant impact because they're getting notified as they cross a barrier or just in time, and they're correcting that behavior. And if they miss a check-in or what, their supervisor gets notified. So then they can have automatically sent to these type of retraining or reskilling courses to make sure that they fully understand why the workflow that they're following, would need to be changed. And so they're given an opportunity to learn just in time as part of their role. So that's just one example, but there's thousands, especially when you start talking about field operations. But more so, accessibility is key. And tying it to your performance management plan, but also having communications that are more just the facts in little digestible bites that people can absorb very easily and do, on their own time is another thing that I've seen be a lot more successful in helping to upskill or reskill. And I also think that one of the things that we sometimes forget is that those general awareness opportunities to upskill or for digital fluency sometimes get left behind. And that's a really big part of how we have to start building that into all of our general communications in the same way we did with safety back in the day, and the same way we did as we're transitioning to the future of energy. Now, everything's about making sure that we have that benefit for sustainability built in. all of those things are also opportunities to really increase the digital fluency of your workforce and your leaders.
I think
Thanks,
just
Tracy.
to comment on top of what Tracy and Vitor said, I think we should also think in terms of how much technology can also empower people. It's very easy sometimes to keep pleasing the end user, and we keep pleasing that end user that is part of a very small expert group because they want to keep taking that decision themselves. And by creating digital solutions, you can also lower the threshold of decision making, so generalists can take decision. If you look at something that makes sense in the screen, you don't need 25 years of experience to take that decision. So it's very important also that we balance how much we please the experts and how much we try to lower the threshold to empower people to be in remote operating rooms, for instance. Yeah.
Well said. You may not need to sit on a rig site for 25 years to understand how to splash a BOP as much as you did in the past. And I'll tie that back to this and view, that we want to have the experts and we want to empower those with less experience versus trying to turn one against the other. And I just want to reflect on Tracy's comment that if you're trying to upskill your workforce and the resources you're providing are not accessible, or people don't have the time, or it's not tied into their performance management plan, then the chance of success looks pretty slim. Any final thoughts from Elisabetta or Esther on this topic of upskilling?
Yeah, yes. I've just two words. I mean, the others have already said everything which I share. I would like only to add the fact that I'm convinced that the cultural shift does not occur in a class. It happens only if it's felt. So I do not see much investment in traditional learnings and learning ways, but really something which is very practical, which is driven by examples. So while working, and so I think that within teams, the empowerment comes from putting multidisciplinary teams together, where everybody is responsible and ready to express ideas, doubt, critics, which should be proactive critics and solutions. So I would say that building new professions, also hybrid figures, happens on the field, I think, establishing cross-disciplinary teams. We saw that works, and that creates really an innovative view over the future profession, even in person that really were skeptical and didn't want to, let's say, to change. So from the experience, I would give just a positive view. And I pass to also to Esther to go ahead with the persuasion.
Yeah, no, it's I fully agree. It's the classroom teaching and let's have a training session now and you might need it in 5 months. It's not helping. Product that go out. I like the term just-in-time learning. Indeed, make sure that you have super users, that you create this small I keep calling them the dancers within your team, giving them make them shine. You know, we suddenly have internal Power BI experts. They are shining. They are developing their products. And they are bringing the enthusiasm to the other people in the teams. And then the accessibility. I think what I've learned quite is assume no knowledge, and it sounds hard, but just go from the bare minimum and work from there and have things accessible. So have them whatever in written, in video. You have to have everything in different ways because people learn differently, and that's really short on this one. My views.
We are at time, so I'd like to really thank all of our panelists. Hopefully each of you learned something today. We didn't see any live questions come through, which indicates everyone answered this to everyone's satisfaction. So please join me in thanking the panelists, and I hope that you all can go forward and dance the dance that is getting the most value from leadership in an agile world. Back over to you, Adam.